Hi team. 3 months from now will be Christmas and New Year. That's 12 weeks, 1 full year in the 12-week year. If you've not come across the 12-week year, it's a book written by Brian P. Morgan and Michael Langton. Now, I highly recommend this book. Definitely one to read. It's a great framework for making any kind of change, forcing you to really focus on the critical task each week, making every week count. That in theory, if you apply correctly, will lead to much higher productivity and much more successful change. Now, I was so impressed by this book. I was thinking, how do we use it for any kind of change? Now, this could be anything from, going on a diet to, changing your finances. And many of the concepts here apply so nicely to financial freedom and financial habits. So I'm going to talk you through the book. I'm going to talk you through these and how they apply to the framework. I hope you enjoy this video. So firstly, going to open up the concept by just talking about the Wheel of Life. Now, you might have not come across the Wheel of Life before. It's a framework that essentially covers all the different aspects of your life, from your career to your finances to your health. Now, the idea is to have a good, fulfilling life. You balance all of these aspects and you work towards increasing, where you rate yourself on the Wheel of Life. Now, finances is a bit of subjective because obviously it depends on what your view of good finances is, and where do you want to be in life, and what you deem is satisfactory in that. But we're going to look at it because I think one of the most important things is around, what are you planning to do with your life? Because if you don't know that, if you don't know where you want to be, you might live with regret. You might look back and think of all the things you could have changed and done to make your life better. And finances has a massive impact on and contributing to how you feel about life, particularly when you look back at the end of your career or in retirement. And those decisions you made today have a massive impact on the future in your life. So we're going to be looking at that. So the principle of the 12-week year is you set 2 or 3 goals. You break them into critical tasks. On Monday, you plan for what those are. Throughout the week, you implement them. And on Friday, you score how well you did against them. And then on Sunday, you reset and plan for the next week. The book emphasizes acting in the day, making every day count, planning for that future, and you controlling the actions that lead to these results. You might have come across this before, but lead indicators are essentially actions you control. And they're things that you can control each week. So it could be, what you saved, what hours you work you've done. But these lead indicators are essentially things, your inputs that lead to your outputs. Now, your outputs are your lag indicators, and these are the results that follow based off what you've done. So if you take an action, you'll see a consequence of that. So if you eat well, you should lose weight. 3 examples of these are sort of money. If you set up an auto transfer or you spend less on certain days, you should see your savings rate increase or your net worth improve. In your career, you might want to reach out and send CVs, send messages to recruiters, and you might therefore get interviews off the back of that. If you're trying to create a career or create YouTube content, for example, like I am today, you would write scripts, you would record those videos, and hopefully you would get subs, like and subscribe. But essentially, whatever you do and whatever critical task you write down, you effectively want to be able to create a progress bar of what you're achieving. So the book talks about trying to get around 65-70% minimum as a completion rate. And if you do that and you're honest and truthful about it and you measure yourself as you go along, you should see these changes improve, and you should see that they lead to that outcome that you're looking for. So you've got to start with, where are you right now before you can start this journey? The first question you'd ask is, do you have an emergency fund? If no, then we've got to think about building an emergency fund, maybe £1,000 or whatever you can afford. If you do, then you can start thinking about, do you have a high interest debt? For example, credit card debt or any other forms of debt. And if you do, then you need to clear that debt first. If you don't, amazing. Right, we can move on to, are you investing? Now, the next question is, are you investing regularly? So if you're not, you need to think about how you're going to raise your income. You're going to track your net worth, and you're going to improve the efficiency of what you're saving and what you're creating, and also your investments. Now, it's really important to note that raising your income, tracking your efficiency, increasing your net worth, etc., applies to all 4 steps. So whether you're at stage 1, 2, or 3, you need to be thinking about raising your income, etc. And all of that will be supported by increasing your income and tracking your efficiency, etc. So it applies to all of these steps. And that will lead to your financial stability first milestone. So we're going to look at the 12-week year plan. So the first week, we're going to be doing a bit of an audit and awareness of where we are today. The second week, we're going to do mindful spending. What are we spending on where? The third week, we're going to be thinking about automating our savings. The fourth week, we're going to be looking at our debt plan and how we're going to pay our debt down, if we have any. The fifth week is around how we build up an emergency fund. The sixth week is how we're going to start investing, the basics of investing. Now, in 12 weeks, we're not going to suddenly be able to invest lots or get any sort of material gain. This is around setting the principles, setting the foundation. The seventh week is we're going to be thinking about how we can boost our income. Now, we don't have to actualize this in the 12 weeks, but the 12 weeks is this foundation, getting the concepts, the theory around why we're doing it, and just starting to get ideas and concepts around where we might be able to achieve this. The eighth week, we're going to be thinking around what our goals are. We're going to think about what types of credit we take and smart use of credit. We're going to be assessing what our net worth is and getting a bit of a threshold and a line in the sand of where we are today. Then we're going to check and score how we've achieved over the course of this program. And then we're going to be resetting, stretching goals, and thinking about the next 12-week cycle. So any type of change creates some sort of emotional cycle. Now, it doesn't matter if it's saving money, going on a diet, changing jobs, changing career, whatever it might be, any change leads through this emotional cycle. The book talks about this cycle of emotional change, but it's actually a common concept used throughout many places and widely known, but I'm going to talk you through it today. So over time, when you go through any change, in stage one is called uninformed optimism. Now, uninformed optimism is essentially where you don't know what you're going to encounter as you go through that change. So you've got the intention, I want financial freedom, I want some sort of financial security or some sort of goals around your sort of financial welfare or any kind of change we're going through. But you've not yet experienced it, so you don't know how you're going to feel, you don't know how you're going to react as you go through this journey. Leading to step two is your informed pessimism. So effectively, you're starting to realize, the consequences of this change. So if you've had to cut back on certain things, you're going through some sort of difficulty and realizing you're giving things up. And sometimes that realization starts to bite. And that's what leads to the third stage. The third stage is called the valley of despair. Now, this is when most people give up. They go back to stage one and essentially have to push through this to succeed. And then in the fourth stage, it's called informed optimism. Now, informed optimism is when you know exactly how, this journey is, what you're having to give up, the consequences of it and the hardness of those decisions you're making, but you're happy to make them. You're starting to see some gains and see the change. And that leads through to stage five. Stage five is success and fulfillment. So this is essentially where, you're starting to see the outcomes of that. You're starting to feel the reward of that, and you're becoming motivated by that change. And this is the cycle of change. So in week one, what are we going to do? So in week one, think about the action. So we're going to categorize all of our spend, ideally for the last 3 months. Now, this is quite a painful task. It will take a bit of time, but it's so important. If you do nothing this whole 12 weeks, or if you want any change, you have to understand where you are today. You have to document and go through everything you spend, where you're spending it. Now, 99% of people wouldn't have no clue what they earn, what goes into their bank, what they spend, how they manage their money. Literally, they will have no clue around how they're spending the money. So to understand how we're going to move forward, we have to know where we are today. We have to know how we behave, what our spending habits are. So you have to document and go through each of your types of spending and document, is it fixed, is it discretionary, or is it debt? Okay, so you have to push through and do this one step. If you can't do this, then this program's not for you. So the mindset shift here is you can't hide. The clarity that you will understand from doing this exercise will beat the anxiety, or in theory should help you get over that anxiety, because once you've done it, you'll know exactly where you stand and what opportunities you have. And this will make you understand what savings rate you can achieve each month. In week two, we're going to be thinking about mindful spending. Now, what is this? So we're going to eliminate some of our spending. So we've gone through, analysed what we're spending every week. We know how many coffees we're buying, where our spending is. We're going to go through and work out where we can cut that out and be mindful of the decisions that we make and where we spend our money. So the mindset shift here is the sacrifice, the comfort for that vision. So the vision goes back to the wheel of life, how important something is to you, where do you want to be in the future, and what your life means, how this contributes to that. And we have to go through and make those changes. And we have to try and get our mindset to shift, that this is money saved buys freedom, buys change, buys freedom and life changes in the future. And we can measure that by how much we've saved each week. Simple. In week 3, we're going to automate our savings. So what is our first action? We're going to open a high yield savings account. We're going to try and automate some of our income on payday, around the whole payday cycle, into this savings account. Now, if you've done the first 2 exercises in the first 2 weeks correctly, you should know what you're spending and what you can cut out, and therefore how much you can save each month or on payday, and automate into your savings account. Now, the mindset here is around enforcing that change through automation, because if you're left to just discipline and your own motivation, quite often that's hard and you're fat. So by automating it, you take away that sort of emotional or decision. It just happens by itself. So it makes you succeed. And the measurement is how much you've automated. So if you aim to sort of put 2% of your salary aside every month, have you achieved that? Simple. Keep it really simple. Week 4 is our debt plan. So annual percentage rates, that's the interest you have on any form of debt. Typical credit cards are 20%, so very, very high, for example. So we want to try and minimize the APR across all of our any kind of debt we may or may not have. You might be able to consolidate your debt, you might be able to negotiate on your debt, but effectively, we want to reduce the rates on our debt and reduce our debt. So the mindset shift here is just taking action. Rather than just being the intention of action and being intimidated by debt and fearing debt, we need to focus on taking some form of action to help us clear that debt. We've got to focus on the high APRs first. And the metric here is, have we cut our APR? Have we made an overpayment? Simple. Doesn't matter if it's, very small amounts. The goal here is just to start making those overpayments. Small is better than none. Week 5, we're going to look at our habits and our mini emergency fund. Now, this is 12 weeks. We're not going to be able to make, particularly for most people, not going to be able to save £1,000, $1,000 in the first 12 weeks. We're not trying to sort of radically change our lives in 12 weeks. We're setting the foundation. So how do we give ourselves that initial emergency fund or initial buffer? Now, for most people, we have lots of things lying around our house, things we can sell if we need to, things we don't use, clothes we don't use, whatever it might be. And we can sell those and create that emergency buffer almost overnight. So go around, find anything you don't need and sell it. Create your emergency buffer, put it in your high interest account, put it away, and it'll give you so much more comfort. So the small wins build this momentum here. So we need to try and create that emergency buffer for things we can sell, and start to put money aside each time we get paid into this emergency buffer until we have the values that we need, whether that's $1,000, £1,000, whether it's a few months of our expenses. The small amounts, we don't need to hit this in 12 weeks. The 12 weeks is the foundation. It's not going to change overnight. We have to start with the foundation, the principles, the habits. And so the metric here, how we measure this is, have we got an emergency fund? By the end of this 12 weeks, have we got something? It might not be enough to cover the biggest eventuality, but have we physically done it? Having it done, whether it's £100 versus £1,000, you still got one step forward. You're still going to feel like you've made that win, that achievement, and you'll start to get the momentum and the confidence that you're actually succeeding. So week 6, we're going to start talking about investing. Now, depending on circumstances, this might not be possible, but for many people, you can opt into pensions, you can start putting money into pensions, or you can start putting money into ISAs or other tax shields, wrappers. So we're going to try and automate something. So I put £50 per week here, but it could literally be any amount you can save. But we're not going to go into the benefit of all the pensions here, but saving to pensions is one of the best mechanisms you can to get your financial situation to control, particularly as you retire, and that sort of tax saving you can have, the tax shield, that it comes off your gross salary, not your net salary. So all the money you put in is not taxed. It goes straight into your pension. It's shielded from tax for the entire, duration until you retire. And so it has that chance to grow and give you some financial freedom later in life. Really important. So in 12 weeks, we're not going to suddenly, talk about compounding interest having a massive impact. What we're talking about here is setting it up, just purely setting it up. Talk to someone in your business, talk to someone like in HR about opting into your pension. Maybe Google it, maybe ask AI, ask about what this impact could have on your life. Put in something simple, say, I am a 12-year-old. I'm investing X per month, per week. Explain it to me in layman's terms. Explain it to me like I'm a 12-year-old, okay? Think about how much you can save. Ask it to tell you what it thinks you could have roughly, and give you an explanation of why. Not the purpose of this video, but it's really important you understand the concept of compounding and how much this one action, small amounts today, will compound over the lifetime of your career. So the mindset shift here is focusing on those lead indicators, setting it up, the deposits, not the market returns. We're not going to see major market returns in 12 weeks, a year, even a few years. This is a long-term habit, but one is the foundation you need to get the ball rolling now. It's the start of that snowball. Effectively, the metric is, have you started? Full stop. If you started, amazing. Put some money into your pension, put some money into savings, start investing if you can. Week 7, income boost. Now, again, we're talking about 12 weeks here. We're not going to suddenly, massively increase our salary or come up with some grand schemes to kind of increase our top line revenue. We are thinking purely around what things can I do in my influence, whether it's asking someone at work, asking different people in different positions at work how they got there, what steps you can take to, get promoted, what learning experiences, training you can do to get promoted, to get more income, thinking about what jobs you might want to do next, how are you going to get those jobs, what sort of salary they might give you. You might think about what skills you've got today, what skills you've got that will allow you to do some freelancing, some side work. Analyzing your time, people forget that, a lot of us just spend a lot of time doing a lot, not value add stuff. If we're ruthless with our time, most of us always have spare time and capacity to do extra work. So it could be simply doing more hours and being ruthless around, what is your priority? Is your priority watching Netflix, or is your priority, earning a few extra hours of wage, and clearing that debt or working towards your financial goals? So the mindset here is that you can only cut so far. Your costs are capped, so your income is unlimited potentially, and therefore, that is something we need to start thinking about. We're not going to achieve it in 12 weeks, but we are going to start thinking about how we're going to do it on the next cycle. The metric is simply just planning. Have you planned? What have you thought through? Have you written it down? Have you got a bit of an action plan? Where are you going to go next? What are you going to earn next? You need to plan, work it through, create a plan, and create steps towards that plan. So week 8 is our savings goal. Now I need to pick one goal, whether it's a house deposit, how much you're going to save per month. Simple. Write it down, share it with someone. Accountability. Mindset here is around your vision, create your passion, and that allows you to overcome a difficulty. Now, this change, any change, whether it's money changes, diets, career, anything, you will not change if you don't want to. If you don't have a strong enough vision, strong enough passion to change, you will not change. The metric is, have you recorded it? Have you shared this with an accountability partner? Have you told someone about it? Have you created a vision board? Vision board is images of things you envisage for your life. What is the life you want? Put images of all those things onto a board, onto a screen, on your phone. And every time you see it, it should bring the emotions forward of everything you need to do and everything that you will push yourself to do to enable you to get to that vision. Okay. And then, or you could write your eulogy. So a eulogy, if you don't know what that is essentially what someone might say about you, when you die. And it's quite an emotional task. If you sit and do it thoroughly and you write it down, say, what would someone want to say about me? Was I a good father? Did I, was I generous? Did I do different things? What would people want? What would you want to look back on your life and think about your life? Whether or that, The eulogy is a very powerful tool. Week 9 is around smart credit use. Now, in summary, this is about using credit, but using it in a smart way. So examples could be, you've got a credit card. It might give you some benefit like air miles, cashback, something like that. But if you're disciplined, if you can pay it off, then maybe get it. If you're undisciplined, you can't pay it off, and you're just sitting there as extra debt, with a high interest, absolutely do not take it. You've got to ask yourself, are you accountable? Do you own it? Don't blame other people. If you use it, you've got to be responsible. Otherwise just avoid it completely, because, credit is easy to get today. People push credit on us because it's easy to do. People are more than willing to give people credit, and yet we're not quick to deal with it. So people have more and more credit cards, they get into more and more debt because they can, and they shouldn't. And so they need to stop. And if you're not responsible, if I'm not going to take accountability of this credit, then I'm going to stop. I'm going to have no credit cards, or I'm going to push that credit away. Now, a good target is to have less than 10% here. So effectively here, if you had a credit card which had a £2,000 or $2,000 limit on it, and you've got £400 spent on it, that's 20% utilization. So really we want to be up under 10% or zero, keeping credit card limits down. Do not get credit card limits. You should absolutely need to, and you can repay it back in a very short period of time. So net worth baseline. So as part of this 12 weeks, we're not going to suddenly explode our net worth. We're not going to be thinking about how we suddenly radically changed our life in 12 weeks. We just need to know where we are today, because if we don't know where we are, we don't know how to measure how we're progressing, how we're increasing, and how we're growing, and how we're succeeding. So simply, we're going to be looking at our assets and our liabilities. So let's think about this. Our assets are things like cash, our equity in our house. Liabilities are things like debt, car loans, other sorts of liabilities. And essentially, your net worth is your assets less your liabilities, and that gives you your net worth. Now, what gets measured improves. That's the mindset. We need to know where we are today. We have to measure it. And the metric, essentially, does it increase? Again, it's not going to increase a lot over 12 weeks, but it's the principle. It's setting that stone, making sure we're measuring it, making sure that it's increasing. And it could just be a very small amount, but it doesn't matter. The point of this 12 weeks is to know what it is, see it improve. Lastly, we're going to be checking and looking at the scorecard. So we're going to be auditing the last 8 weeks, and we're going to be looking at our failures. Now, people are often just, quit when the going gets tough, or quit when something fails. So the mindset here is, if you fail at something, even if it's like a one-off. So for example, if you're meant to go to the gym 4 times and you miss one, you think, I've missed one, I might as well not go for the rest of the week, or I've had a cheat meal, I'm just going to go off my diet. Or the same with this, you plan to not buy any coffee this week. You bought a coffee, thought, or I bought a dress, or whatever it might be, bought something, and you thought, well, I've gone off the bandwagon, I've spent loads of money this month, I might as well spend more. That's when things compound badly, right? You need to just take a step back, pause. It's not failed, it's just one blip. So you need to just accept that, this failure, it's not a failure in total. Like, just keep going, accept these failures. We all fail, we all have blips. So keep going, keep persevering. And we need to be aiming for around 70% success in this. The book talks very strongly about having a 70% minimum for this to actually be successful, or any form of change. You need around 70% of all the little targets and all the objectives you set each week to be achieved for any sort of meaningful change. Week 12 is around the stretch goals and resetting. So every 12th week, we're going to review what we did. We're going to re-stretch some goals and think about what we're going to do for the next cycle. Now, this could be for the next 12-week cycle, but also now starting to think about the years ahead. So the first 12 weeks are the most important. That's when you kind of set the habits, set the behaviors. And hopefully, if you've done it well, then that will lead to the sort of greater change over the long term. But the first 12 weeks are the most important, because you're not going to suddenly change things overnight, but you're setting the foundations of what you're going to be achieving. Getting the habits, behaviors, your spending habits is really hard to overcome. We're almost indoctrinated into spending because of being materialistic. We have social media pushing things on us all the time. It's so hard to kind of sort of go against the grain, social pressures, whatever it might be, to kind of live to what you earn, not live within your means. And these 12 weeks are so important to try and help with that change. So our mindset here is that these sprints are really powerful. 12-week sprints are like running a marathon. You're trying to do a lot, but you're trying to reinforce and restart and reset. Okay. So we're just thinking around what our next cycle is and locking in what we're going to be doing for the next 12 weeks, but really assessing that, did we honestly achieve what we wanted to do? We need to be really honest around how we've achieved in these 12 weeks. So our goals for this 12 weeks, simply put, is our savings should have improved. So we may have had 2 or 3 pay cycles depending on when we've come into it. So we should have seen a little bit of money saved. It doesn't need to be a lot. It's setting the foundations, the principles, the habit. Same with debt. So if you've got debt, we should have seen that reduce. So hopefully you've had some money put aside, you've stopped buying certain things you were doing before, and you've made some form of repayment. It could be really small. It doesn't matter. It's the principle. You've seen that traction. You've seen it come down. You know how much debt you had at the beginning. It's come down and it's lower than it was when you started. And lastly, the habits. This isn't just about money. This is about habits. In fact, the habits and the emotion and the vision are far more important here in the first 12 weeks. All of these videos in around 12 weeks, 6 months, 12 months, around changing life, around finances, talk about all these different ways and things you should be doing and saving and investing and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, the most important thing here is habits, behaviors, emotion, and creating that vision that enables you to make those changes. So you're tracking what you're doing because you've written down your tasks, you've written down what you're doing, and you're assessing how well you're doing each week. And hopefully, if you're being honest and truthful around this, you should see that your habits have improved. And naturally, you're starting to do this. You're thinking about it almost. Your instinct is not to go and buy that coffee or whatever it might be. You've got that, awareness now. So next, we're going to be talking about pitfalls and safeguards here because, look, let's be honest, this is really difficult. So we need to sort of think about the things that are going to derail us on this journey and this kind of change. And I think firstly, it's around this, you've not got your why. You don't know why you're doing this. You've not really thought about it. You've not got that true vision. You might have not done your vision board. You might not have really thought about it. You need to really connect what it is you're trying to do here to your behaviors and your habits, thinking about your family, your freedom, every dollar or pound you save is, buying that freedom. But if you don't really connect to it, if you don't really understand that, then you're quite likely to fail. The next thing is around having a vision that's too small. So let's say you've gone through and understand what you spend and you've got the opportunity to save £200 and you've only achieved £100. Maybe absolutely pat yourself on the back, but you're not stretched yourself. You knew you could save £200 and you only saved £100. So, a pitfall here is that you just think, I'm still achieving, but my potential is much higher. You're not achieving your stretch goals. You're not pushing yourself to get through and make those changes. You're not challenging yourself enough here. The third thing is around being a victim. Now, it's hard. Of course, everyone feels, depending on the circumstances, we're not all blessed to live in certain countries and certain places and have family and friends in different life situations, but we can control certain things in our life. We can take action on certain things that we can control and influence. So we've got to sort of take ownership of this. Don't give away your power. Don't, give away influence. You've got to take ownership. Don't be the victim. Act on what you can and can't control in your life. The fourth thing is around overcommitting. Now, the principles of the 12-week year is that you only set 2 or 3 goals a week maximum. If you try and do more than that in any kind of change or any kind of planning or programming, generally you fail or you don't do as well as you should do in those tasks. So you really just need to kind of focus on the critical tasks, focus on those first, and then move on to the next week. Number 5 is around accountability, and it can be seen as a bit of a punishment. So doing this, punishing yourself, making these sort of sacrifices, taking accountability, it's hard. Making these changes, you can feel like you're punishing yourself for making them and going through this change. But it's taking ownership for what you're trying to achieve, taking ownership for where you are and how you're trying to get to where you want to be. And that leads us on to accountability and to commitment. So firstly, we've got to share our vision with others. So, having an accountability buddy, talking to somebody, making sure that people understand your vision helps you to deliver. If you tell someone about something, you're far more likely to achieve it. The second is your weekly accountability meeting or buddy or journal. So there's different ways of doing this. You can join forums, you can write journals, you can invite people to talk to each week. You've got some goals here, whether it's saving, paying down debt. By telling people about it, by being accountable to someone else, you're more likely to achieve these, and more likely to achieve the goals rather than just trying to do it for your own self. And you could even just do this by writing down it in a journal or on a forum or something and just posting how you're achieving and tell people about your journey, tell people about what you're doing. It helps to get it off your chest. It helps you to deliver those results. The third thing is around, not overcommitting. We talked about it before around doing 2 or 3 things a week, but, do go public and tell someone about it, but don't overcommit, because one of the key things here is about overcommitting and then failing. The fourth thing is around any kind of commitment or small wins here will build self-esteem. Now, effort will stop many people from making any kind of meaningful change, but this effort will build character. As you start to see success, as you start to see these, taking action, you always feel fulfilled and rewarded once you take any kind of action. Very, very positive to do something, see the traction, see the wins. The fifth thing is around accountability is not consequences, it's ownership, right? Number 6, not number 7, is acknowledging reality, right? So I had some things. Number 6, sorry, it says number 7. Number 6 is acknowledging reality. It's focusing on things you can control. You got to acknowledge where you are. Take stock of where you are today, where you want to be, and focusing on what you can control. Because at the end of the day, that's all you can do. You can't change maybe things around you, but you can focus on things that you can control today. So Brian P. Morgan and Michael Langton, wrote this 12 weeks year. So essentially the way they describe it is doing the 12 weeks with 1 week reset afterwards, and then going again, doing 12 weeks again, 12 weeks again, 12 weeks again. And that's essentially your year. Now, they argue that you'll be far more productive and deliver far more outcomes and deliver much more by doing it in 12-week cycles, because you're holding yourself account to much smaller tasks in the here and now rather than the future. Because if you try and push things out for a year, you get the hockey stick effect and you end up trying to do all the stuff at the end of the year and you never achieve things. You need to be holding yourself account every single week, day by day by day. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video. The first 12 weeks are by far the most crucial. You've got to set aside any kind of ego. Don't wait for January. Right now is the moment you've got to do it. 3 months from now, you'll be looking back at all those changes, all those benefits you've had. You'll be feeling much more positive about where you are and the state of your finances. What are you planning to do with your life? What is your financial goals? What do you want to achieve in life? You cannot get to where you want to be unless you're willing to make those sacrifices today. So pick one financial goal. Break it into these actions. Don't overcomplicate it. Track it for these 12 weeks and then repeat and see how much you can achieve. I've really enjoyed reading this book again, The 12-Week Year, and thinking about how it can influence and help me in my life and some of the changes I'm going through. But also, how it can be applied and the framework can be applied to finances. It forces you to think about, things, the critical things that can influence your financial situation, breaking it down into those weekly tasks, making sure they're the most critical tasks that you can do to influence that outcome. And then tracking it, simply tracking it, making sure you're actually delivering on it. Now, it's a brilliant framework, and I hope you enjoyed it. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next one.